Mike, we found in some of the other sessions, people like to ask questions from their seats, so we're going to try to pass the mic around to people who might ask questions. Okay. My own feeling, and this is my own personal feeling, we haven't really discussed this. I don't think that board members a board of directors is committed to the organization, the entity as a whole. That's a requirement of law. That's rooted in the English common law, and we've taken it over into this country. So all board members have a duty of loyalty, care, obedience, and confidentiality to serve the entity. Within that context, a resident can serve if they have the requisite qualifications. But it's not a representative body like the Congress of the United States. A board is expected to operate in a collegial way and try to arrive through deliberation at the best choices, and they don't. And so the risk might be that you would have this sort of posturing and pandering that we've been seeing from Congress of late. And I don't think any of us would want that in an organization to which we've committed our lives. But maybe somebody else has a slightly different perspective. Go ahead, Mark.
One of the questions was, are minutes of the board meetings available to residents? And I think this is a great forum to find out what the practice is. In your community, are the board minutes available to residents? If the answer is yes, please raise your hand. And how about they are not?
Very much not.
The preponderance of response to that question is they are not. The other part of the question related to how are the resident members of the board chosen? Are they elected by the residents, or are they elected through the nominating process chosen through the nominating process of the board? Is that a fair assessment of what your question? All right. Let's again see what the audience response is to that. How many places are the resident members of the board elected by the residents? And how many are chosen through the nominating committee of the board itself? There's a corollary to that, and that is on many boards, the chairman of the resident council is on the board, and that is a person who is chosen by the residents. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
Okay, the question's over here now. John, Jack.
I have a different question, though.
You can hear better without the microphone.
You
can hear better without the microphone.
My question is, how does the panel view the relative importance of, on the one hand, the board, and on the other hand, the resident association, evaluating the management of the facility, including budgeting, financing, and daily operations?
The question is the evaluation of the management a prerogative of the board, or should the resident association be involved? I'd like to hear some discussion on that. Does anybody in the audience have an opinion one way or the other, or how they think it should be? I think the residents are stakeholders. Why don't, Bob, there's a lady here who should contribute. I think the residents are an important stakeholder. There may be other stakeholders. The bondholders might have an interest as well.
The retreat that we're going to have next month, and similar to what we had last year, is for the full board of directors and the full resident council.
Oh, the resident council executive committee?
Should the comment as the resident council executive committee or full?
It is not the full resident association, which is the whole community of independent living. The resident council is the elected representatives who meet every month and chair the committees and so on. So it is.
We call that our executive committee. So it's that group that meets in the retreat?
Yes.
I would just add a thought of my own on this topic. We recently had our executive director left, and so they were bringing in a new executive director. And on the resident council, we asked, in our community, it's a multi-facility organization, very large and highly layered and structured. So our executive director reports to a regional vice president, who reports to a chief operating officer, who reports to a chief executive officer, who reports to the board. So we have lots of layers between the person on the ground who's serving the residents and the people at the top who are overseeing things. So I asked the regional VP who was doing the hiring, will some residents from the resident council be allowed to interview the finalists for the executive director? And the answer was, no way. That was the answer. I remember his words, no way. And that's part of how I became active. I live in that facility, and that kind of attitude prevails throughout it. And I can assure you that it's dehumanizing to become merely an object to be served in some sort of oddball way, and when you're providing the funds.
Well, we have just happened to have a few applications for membership in NAGRA, because one of the great benefits is the bi-monthly edition of Lifeline, NAGRA Lifeline. Marlene is the editor, and she selects magnificent articles. There'll be many articles in the next one about these meetings that we're going through, but the vehicle for us to really communicate with everybody at this point is through Lifeline. There are many active committees going on, and there's more happening, but we are so delighted that you're here today and that we can share with you our life. And so real quickly, I'm going to let Marlene also talk about that.
There are copies of Lifeline available at our booth in the exposition hall.
It's 647.
We're at 647, and they're not all the most current one, but there's plenty of copies there if you'd like to see it. It's a 12-page newsletter that comes out 6 times a year, and we try to include a number of reports of various activities and workshops and new directions that are occurring in various communities around the country. So it's a nice vehicle for keeping abreast of some of the newer trends. When our last issue had a picture, a little story about croquet at Fleet Landing in Florida. Croquet is becoming very popular, and in our place, all kinds of people who are coming in are learning how to play croquet, and they're very excited about it. And it's not the kind we played in the backyard, believe me.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for getting up so